There is a specific kind of darkness that exists only in the deep valleys of Lancaster County. It is not merely the absence of light. It is a physical weight, a heavy, velvet blanket that presses down on the rolling hills, the silos, and the sleeping farmhouses. In the city, darkness is pushed back by streetlights and neon signs. But here, in the land of the plain people, darkness is respected. It is the time for rest. It is the time when the world stops spinning and God watch us. Inside the farmhouse of the Yoder family, the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 4 times. The sound was deep and resonant, vibrating through the timber frame of the house that had stood on this foundation since 1890. Upstairs, in the room she shared with her 2 younger sisters, Hannah Yoder opened her eyes. She did not need an alarm clock. Her body was tuned to the rhythm of the farm, to the circadian pulse of the livestock and the sun. The room was freezing. It was late October, and the frost had settled on the window panes in intricate fernleaf patterns. Hannah lay still for a moment, listening. She could hear the rhythmic breathing of her sister Mary in the bed next to her. She could hear the wind rattling the loose shingle on the roof. Hannah was 20 years old. In the English world, the world of the outsiders, 20 is a time of noise, of college campuses, of finding oneself. But here, 20 is a time of settling. It is the age of baptism, the age of marriage, the age where the I disappears and becomes part of the we. She threw back the heavy quilts. They were made of scraps, old shirts, ruined dresses, leftover fabrics stitched together in the log cabin pattern. Her grandmother had made this quilt. Every stitch was a prayer. Every square was a lesson in thriftiness. Hannah's feet hit the bare pine floorboards, and the cold shot up her legs like a shock of electricity. She moved by memory in the pitch black. She found the matches on the dresser. The flare of the match was deafeningly bright in the dark room as she lit the small kerosene lamp. The golden light bloomed, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. Dressing was a ritual. First, the white stockings, thick and cotton. Then, the dress. It was dark purple today, a solemn color for a solemn life. She pulled it over her head, the fabric smelling of the cedar chest and woods. There were no zippers to zip, no buttons to fasten, just straight pins. One by one, she pinned the placket of her dress, her movements practiced and efficient. Finally, the hair. Hannah had hair the color of dried wheat, thick and heavy. She brushed it out 100 strokes and then braided it tight against her scalp. She placed the cap, the white organy prayer covering, over her head and tied the strings under her chin. With the tying of the strings, Hannah Yoder disappeared. The girl with the wild thoughts, the girl who wondered what the ocean looked like, was hidden away. In her place stood a daughter of the church, a worker, a servant. She crept downstairs, avoiding the 3rd step that always creaked. In the kitchen, the heart of the home, the air was still stale from the night before. Her mother, Sarah, was already there. Sarah Yoder was a woman who seemed to be carved from the earth itself, sturdy, weathered, and silent. "Guten Marie Hannah," Sarah whispered, not looking up from the stove where she was feeding kindling into the firebox. "Guten Marie," Mangim Hannah replied. They worked in tandem, a dance choreographed by years of repetition. Hannah fetched the water bucket from the mudroom. She filled the kettle. She set the table at plates, upside down. 8 mucks. No words were spoken. In the Amish home, speech is reserved for necessity. Idle chatter is the devil's workshop. But as Hannah sliced the homemade bread, the knife creating a rhythmic rasping sound against the crust, her mind was not on the bread. It was on the calendar hanging by the door. Today was Tuesday. Tuesday was market day. Tuesday was the day she took the buggy down to the end of the long gravel lane, to the small wooden shelter that sat by the side of the state highway. Tuesday was the day she sold the jams, the chow-chow, and the quilts. And Tuesday was the day he came. The sun had just crested the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, when Hannah guided the old mare, Betsy, down the lane. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and cow manure, the perfume of the harvest. The roadside stand was their borderland. It was the exact point where the sacred met the profane. Behind the stand lay the Yoder farm, 120 acres of corn and tobacco, tilled by horses, untouched by the power grid. In front of the stand lay Route 30, a ribbon of asphalt that carried the English world past them at 60 miles per hour. Hannah unloaded the crates. Jars of strawberry rhubarb jam glowed like rubies in the morning light, pickled beets, apple butter as dark as molasses. She arranged them with care. She was an artist, though she wasn't allowed to use that word. She saw the beauty in the geometry of the jars. She saw the way the light hit, the dust motes dancing in the air. At 9 a.m., the traffic picked up. Tourists in shiny rental cars slowed down to gawk. They took pictures with their phones, stealing images of Hannah without asking. She learned to look down, to hide her face behind the brim of her bonnet. To them, she was scenery. She was a prop in a living museum. But then, at 9:30 a.m., the sound changed. It wasn't the hum of a sleek rental car. It was the rattling cough of an old engine. A silver sedan, rusted around the wheel wells, pulled onto the gravel shoulder. The bumper sticker on the back read, "Support local art." Hannah's heart did something dangerous. It fluttered. It beat a rhythm that was not the slow, steady plod of a plow horse, but the frantic wing beat of a sparrow trapped in a barn. The door opened, and Mark stepped out. Mark was everything Hannah was not allowed to be. He was messy. He wore jeans that were frayed at the hems. He wore a T-shirt with a band logo on it. His hair was sandy and unkempt, falling over eyes that were a piercing, curious blue. He was an art student from the university in the city, driving the back roads to sketch the old barns. "Morning, Hannah," he said. His voice was loud, unmodulated by the fear of being overheard. He walked up to the stand, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Hello, Mark," Hannah said, keeping her eyes on the jars. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap so he wouldn't see them shaking. "Did you do it?" he asked. He didn't ask about the jam. He didn't ask about the price of the quilts. "Mark, please," she whispered, glancing at the road. "The neighbors." "There's no one around, Hannah, just us and the chickens." He leaned his elbows on the wooden counter, encroaching on her space. "Did you draw this week?" Hannah hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached under the counter, beneath a stack of potholders. She pulled out a small brown paper bag. It was a grocery bag she had flattened out. On the rough paper, drawn in charcoal she had taken from the fireplace, was a sketch. It wasn't a barn. It wasn't a horse. It was a hand, her father's hand, resting on the Bible. The charcoal captured the gnarled knuckles, the thick veins, the weight of the hand pressing down on the holy book. Mark took the paper. He held it like it was a fragile manuscript. He stared at it for a long time. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the heavy silence of the farmhouse. It was an electric silence. "You have it," Mark said softly, shaking his head. "The shading here, the tension in the fingers. Hannah, you're not just doodling. You're seeing. Most people look, but you see." "It is just a drawing," she said, though her heart swelled with a pride she knew she should confess on Sunday. "It's art," Mark corrected. "It's expression. It's your voice." He looked up at her, his eyes locking onto hers. "Imagine what you could do with real charcoal. With good paper, with training." "I cannot imagine those things," Hannah said, taking the paper back and sliding it quickly under the counter. "I have chores, Mark. I have a life. You have a routine," Mark said. "There's a difference." He reached into his messenger bag. "I brought you something. I know you returned the book last week, but this isn't a book." He placed a small rectangular tin on the counter. It was a set of drawing pencils. Graphite, ranging from 2H to 6B. "Mark, I can't. They're just pencils. Hannah, tools. Your father uses tools to build barns. You use tools to build." "This." He tapped the counter. "Take them. Please. Just hide them. Draw something for yourself, not for God, not for the community. Just for Hannah." She looked at the tin. It was sleek, black, modern. It was a key to a door she had locked long ago. "I will buy a jar of peach jam," Mark said, his voice shifting to a business tone as a buggy appeared in the distance, "and 2 choufle pies." He placed a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change. Use it to buy yourself some time." As he drove away, the dust billowing behind his car, Hannah slipped the tin of pencils into the deep pocket of her dress. It felt heavy against her hip. It felt like a stone. It felt like a secret that could sink her. The week dragged on. The physical labor of the Amish life is designed to exhaust the body, so the mind has no energy to wander. Hannah scrubbed the pine floors on her hands and knees until her knuckles were raw. She helped her father shuck corn, the dry husks slicing her fingers. She canned 40 quarts of tomatoes, the kitchen steaming and smelling of acid and salt. But every night she touched the tin in her pocket. On Sunday night there was a singing. This was the social life of the Amish youth. After the long 3-hour church service, the young people, those over 16 but not yet married, gathered at a designated barn to sing hymns. It was also the time for courting. The barn was dimly lit by lanterns hanging from the rafters. The air smelled of hay and nervous sweat. The boys stood on one side, dressed in their Sunday best black vests, white shirts, broad fall trousers. The girls stood on the other, in their dark dresses and white aprons. They sang the Loblid, the song of praise. The voices rose in unison, a slow, mournful chant that had been sung the same way for 400 years. "Godbather, wir loben dich," Hannah sang, her alto voice blending with the others. But she felt detached. She looked across the circle at the boys. There was Samuel. He was a good boy. He had thick shoulders and a shy smile. He was a dairy farmer. Everyone in the district expected Hannah and Samuel to marry. He had already driven her home in his buggy twice. That was practically an engagement. Samuel caught her eye and smiled. It was a safe smile. A smile that promised a warm house, plenty of children, and a plot in the cemetery next to his ancestors. But Hannah didn't feel safe. She felt bored. She thought of Mark. She thought of the way his hands moved when he talked. She thought of the way he challenged her. Samuel would never challenge her. Samuel would never ask her to draw his hand. He would only expect her to hold it. After the singing, the group mingled. Samuel walked over to her, holding a cup of cider. "The singing was good tonight," Samuel said. He spoke in Pennsylvania Dutch, the dialect of the home. "Ja, it was good," Hannah replied. "My father is thinking of buying the Miller farm," Samuel said, kicking at the straw on the floor. "It has good soil, good for corn." "That is good news, Samuel," Hannah said. "If he buys it, I will need a wife to manage the house," Samuel said, blushing deeply. He looked at his boots. This was it. The proposal was hovering in the air. "The soil is important," Hannah said vaguely. "Excuse me, Samuel, I must find Mary." She walked away. She walked out of the barn, into the cool night air. She leaned against the rough wood of the siding and looked up at the stars. They were brilliant, scattered like diamond dust across the black sky. "I don't want good soil," she whispered to the darkness. "I want the stars." But she knew, with a sinking dread, that you cannot farm the stars. The next day, the disaster happened. Hannah was in the garden, pulling the last of the carrots before the ground froze. She had left her apron in the kitchen. Her sister, Mary, was 14. Curious and observant, Mary was looking for a spare pin in Hannah's apron pocket. She didn't find a pin. She found the tin of pencils, and she found the small notebook Hannah had bought from the English store with Mark's change. When Hannah came back into the kitchen, the atmosphere had changed. It was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Her mother stood by the table. Her father, Levi, was sitting in his chair, his face a mask of stone. Mary sat in the corner, crying silently. On the table lay the tin of pencils, and the notebook, open. It was open to a page where Hannah had drawn a self-portrait, but she hadn't drawn herself in a bonnet. She had drawn herself with her hair down, flowing over her shoulders, wild and free. "Hannah," her father said. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder before the storm. "Dead," Hannah breathed, dropping her basket of carrots. They rolled across the floor. Orange accusations. "What is this?" Levy asked, pointing a calloused finger at the drawing. "Is this you?" "This, Jezebel. It is just a drawing. Dead. And these." He picked up the tin. High-quality graphite. "English writing. Where did you get these?" "Did you steal them?" "No. I bought 'em." "With what money?" "You have no money." Levy stood up. He was a large man, intimidating in his wrath. "You have been selling at the stand. Have you been keeping money back? Have you been stealing from the family?" "No." "The English boy, he gave me the extra." The silence that followed was absolute. "The English boy," Sarah repeated, her voice trembling. "The one with the loud car? The one the bishop warned us about." "He is a friend, Mungim," Hannah pleaded. "A friend?" Levi roared, slamming his hand on the table. "He is a wolf. He is a tempter. He comes here with his tools of vanity, and he plants seeds of pride in your heart. Look at this drawing, Hannah. Look at it. This is not a humble Amish girl. This is a woman of the world. A woman who wants to be seen." "I just wanted to make something beautiful," Hannah cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "God made the world beautiful," Levi shouted. "It is not for you to try to improve it. This is Hokmat, pride. It is the sin of Lucifer." Levi walked to the wood stove. He opened the iron door. The fire inside was roaring, hungry. "Dead! No!" Hannah screamed. She lunged forward, but her mother caught her arm, holding her back with surprising strength. "It is for your soul." Hannah, Sarah wept. "It is to save you from the fire of hell." Levi threw the notebook into the fire. Then he threw the pencils. Hannah watched as the paper curled and blackened. She watched the graphite snap and burn. She watched her hair. Her wild, free hair in the drawing turned to ash and flowed up the chimney. "You will not go to the stand again," Levi said, turning to face her. "You will not leave this house. On Sunday, we will speak to the bishop. We will see if you must be put onto the ban. The ban, the Meidung. Total social isolation. If she was banned, no one could eat with her. No one could take anything from her hand. She would be a ghost in her own home. Go to your room, Levi commanded, and pray that God breaks your stubborn heart." Hannah lay on her bed. She did not pray. She could not pray. The God of her father felt like a jailer. She thought of Mark. She thought of his words. "Imagine what you could do." She looked at the window. It was nailed shut for the winter, but the latch was simple. She made a decision. It wasn't a rational decision. It was the desperate, gasping decision of a drowning person reaching for air. She waited until the house was asleep, until the clock struck 2. She didn't have a suitcase. She took a pillowcase. She stuffed it with her heaviest woolen socks, a loaf of bread she stole from the pantry, and the only thing she had left, the handkerchief Mark had touched. She put on her bonnet, not out of piety, but because it was cold. She climbed out the window, shimmying down the trellis that the climbing roses used in the summer. The thorns tore at her dress, scratching her hands, but she didn't feel it. She hit the ground and ran. She ran past the barn, hearing the soft snort of the horses. "Goodbye, Betsy!" She ran past the garden. "Goodbye, carrots!" She ran down the long gravel lane. The stones bit into the thin soles of her boots. The moon was a sliver, offering barely enough light to see. She reached the end of the lane. The stand stood there, a dark skeleton in the night. She stood on the edge of the pavement. Route 30, she knew where Mark lived. He had told her once. Above the hardware store in Strasbourg, 3rd window. It was 5 miles away. A 2-hour walk. She stepped onto the asphalt. It felt hard and unnatural beneath her feet. She started to walk. 1 mile. The silence of the fields was replaced by the distant hum of a truck on the highway. 2 miles. A car zoomed past her, its headlights blinding her, the wind of its passing nearly knocking her over. The driver honked a long, angry blare. Hannah froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the English world. It was loud. It was fast. It was angry. She kept walking, but her steps slowed. She began to imagine the next morning. Mark would open his door. He would be surprised. He would be happy, maybe. But then what? She didn't have a social security number. She didn't have an education. She didn't know how to drive. She didn't know how to use a computer. She would be a child in a land of giants. And Mark. Mark loved the idea of her. He loved the Amish girl with the artistic eye. But would he love Hannah, the refugee? Hannah, the burden. Hannah, who didn't know how to dress for a party or make small talk about movies she'd never seen, and her family. She thought of her mother, Sarah, who had nursed her through scarlet fever, sitting by her bed for 3 days without sleeping. Sarah, who would wake up tomorrow and find the bed empty. The shame would kill her. The community would whisper, "Sarah's daughter went English. Sarah's daughter is lost." Hannah stopped walking. She was standing in front of a gas station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering blue and cold. Inside, a clerk with tired eyes was reading a magazine. It looked so empty. "Is this freedom?" Hannah whispered. "To be a stranger everywhere." She looked at her hands. They were trembling. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the handkerchief. She wiped the tears from her face. She realized then that there are two kinds of prisons. There is the prison of rules, where you are told what to do every minute of the day. And there is the prison of the self, where you are entirely alone with your own choices. The Amish life was hard. It was restrictive. It crushed the ego. But it offered something the English world had lost: belonging. Deep, root-level belonging. If she left, she could paint. But who would she paint for? If Stage she could not paint, but she would be known. She would be loved, even if that love was heavy and demanding. Hannah turned around. The walk back was harder. Her legs felt like lead. The wind was in her face now, pushing her back, as if the world itself was testing her resolve. She walked back past the gas station, back past the empty fields, back to the gravel lane. She walked up the lane to the farmhouse. It was dark, silent. She climbed the trellis, her fingers bleeding now. She slid through the window. She undressed in the dark. She hid the pillowcase. She put on her nightgown. She slid into bed next to Mary. Mary shifted in her sleep, her warm hand falling across Hannah's arm. Hannah lay there, staring at the ceiling. She had chosen the cage. But it was her cage. The next Tuesday, Hannah did not go to the stand. Her father went. He stood there for 3 hours. He sold jam to the tourists. At 9:30, the silver car pulled up. Mark stepped out. He looked eager. He had a brochure in his hand, an application for an art scholarship. He saw Levy. Levy stood tall, his beard flowing in the wind, his face set like flint. "Where is Hannah?" Mark asked, stopping by the car. "She is home," Levy said. His voice was not angry anymore. It was just final. "She is doing her work." "Is she okay?" Mark asked. Did you stop her?" "She stopped herself," Levi said. "She knows who she is." Levi reached under the buggy seat. He pulled out a small envelope. "She asked me to give you this," Levi said. "And she asked that you never come back. If you care for her, if you have any respect for her peace, you will drive away, and you will not turn around." Mark took the envelope. His hands shook. "Tell her," Mark started, but he stopped. There was nothing to tell her that wouldn't make it harder. "Tell her I understand." Levi nodded. A single, sharp nod. "Go with God." Levi got in the buggy and drove away. Mark stood alone on the roadside. He opened the envelope. Inside was the handkerchief, the one with the white embroidery, and wrapped inside the handkerchief was a single piece of charcoal. Burnt wood. There was no note, no drawing, just the charcoal. It was a message. "I have burned the bridge. I have returned to the fire." Mark looked up at the farmhouse on the hill. It looked small and white against the vast gray sky. He thought he saw a curtain move in an upstairs window, but it might have been a trick of the light. He got into his car. He put the charcoal on the dashboard. He started the engine. Drove Hawaii. Final minutes. The quiet years move differently in the Amish country. They are measured in harvests, in barn raisings, in weddings and funerals. Hannah Yoder married Samuel. It was a large wedding, 500 guests, celery soup and roast chicken. Hannah was a good wife. She bore 6 children. She ran the farm finances. She was respected. She never bought a sketchbook again. She never touched a pencil to paper to draw a face, but the artistic spirit is like water. If you block the river, it finds a new path. Hannah became her quilts were not like the others. While the other women used standard patterns, Hannah's quilts were explosions of color and geometry. She used scraps of purple and blue to create the look of a storm sky. She used yellows and golds to mimic the way the sun hit the corn. People came from miles around to buy a Hannah Yoder quilt. They hung them on walls in New York and Los Angeles. Take-eyed modern art masterpieces. Hannah didn't call them that. She just called them blankets. But sometimes, late at night, when the house was asleep and the silence was heavy, Hannah would sit by the kerosene lamp and stitch. And as her needle dove in and out of the fabric, she would think of a boy with sandy hair and a silver car. She would think of the moment on the road when she turned back. She knew she had made the right choice. She had peace. She had a family. She had a God who answered her, even if his answer was no. But sometimes, just for a second, she would wonder what the world looked like through the windshield of a car moving at 60 miles per hour. She would wonder what it felt like to be completely, terrifyingly free. Then she would tie the knot in her thread. She would bite the string, and she would blow out the lamp, letting the darkness, her old friend, take air back.